Welcome to episode 67 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice. If you like what you've heard, go on iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It really helps. Michael, do you like horror games?
I don't.
Are we going to play a horror game?
We're playing a horror game.
Let's get right into it.
I hate you.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, McCourt, and today I have one friend with me. You know him. You love him. His name is Michael Ruffolo.
I'm excited to talk about a game that scared me a lot.
Hey, Mike, you want to hear something funny?
Yeah.
I tricked you into playing a horror game.
You tricked me into playing a horror game. Like, that's not even a lie.
How much do you like horror games?
I don't like horror games.
The horror game that we're going to talk about today is Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice from the team at Ninja Theory, developed by them, published by them, released in 2017 on Windows, PS4, Xbox One in 2018, and Switch in 2019. Michael, tell me about this video game that probably scared the pants off you.
This quote unquote AAA indie.
This AA title.
Yeah, it's a game where you play as a character with I think the right term is psychosis, some type of mental illness, where you are highly encouraged to play with binaural headphones, like that give you full, surround sound experience. And as you're playing, you just always have a slew of voices in your head saying all kinds of things to you.
So before we get into it any further, I think it's very fair to say that if you have not played Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice, we're going to spoil the heck out of the entire game. So please, if you want to play the game, play it. Come back to this. We'll be here when you're ready.
We'll tell you what Senua's Sacrifice was.
How would you describe this type of game? Because it's a like melding of different genres. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say.
So it's got some puzzle solving elements.
Yeah.
It's a kind of hack and slash. It also kind of has action to it, and like you said, kind of the psychological horror stuff as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an adventure game with a Celtic Norse,
Nailed it. Yep.
wrapping. And then, I mean, I think you did a great job describing it. It's got some horror to it. It's got some light combat that looks interesting, but I think is actually pretty dull.
Oh, we're going to have some opinions about this game.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to just get right into it.
Jacob, you tricked me into playing a horror game.
I did. You know what? In hand to God, I did not realize this was such a psychological horror game.
Yeah.
This game's going to scare the pants off you if you don't like horror games.
There was a point where I was just thinking to myself, I feel bad playing this, and I don't like this. So what if I just tell Jacob, "F you, you made me play a horror game, and I'm done. This is it. You can either talk at this level of knowledge in the game, which was maybe like a third of the way through, or I can just not be on it." But here I am.
And you pushed through, and
did.
you did it. My God.
Yeah.
Can I just hold your hand?
Yes.
You are a hero, my friend.
Why were you not holding my hand throughout this whole journey?
Maybe we should have played it together,
Yeah,
because I
maybe we
played
should
part
have.
of it in the dark, and let me tell you, boy, I sure did poop my pants a little bit. Before we get into it, the other games developed by Ninja Theory, we were talking before the show, Kung Fu Chaos was their first game.
Okay.
An Xbox original, great party brawler. Heavenly Sword. Enslaved Odyssey to the West, which I played and loved.
I love that game as well.
DMC Devil May Cry, the failed reboot, or the reboot that didn't go anywhere. I think it was actually a very good game.
I heard it was a good game, but there were no sequels. So, you know.
Yes, and the Wikipedia page says they collaborate with Andy Serkis quite a bit.
I believe Andy Serkis played
the pig in.
Oh, I thought
in
he was the main
Enslaved?
character in Enslaved.
He might have been.
Yeah,
It's been a long time.
it has. I enjoyed Enslaved quite a bit.
How did you play Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice?
I played Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice, the enhanced version on my Xbox One X.
And I played the Xbox Game Pass version on my Xbox One S with headphones because, as we have stated, do not play this game without like binaural headphones. It is not worth it based on what the game does.
There was a point as I was playing that I was like, hey, I just want to listen to a podcast while I play this. And I felt I was losing so much.
Michael, don't listen to a podcast. They want you to talk about podcasts. You need to talk about it on the podcast.
While I was playing that game, there was no physical manifestation of the voices in front of me, or I would have killed them. So be careful here.
Don't kill me, Michael. You should kill me because I deserve it. This game does some things, but it opens a lot like it reminded me of a lot of other games that kind of share the same kind of Norse mythology. So the God of War that just came out last year reminded me of that. Like you're walking through water, essentially like what I would amount to like a Viking vision quest where you're just walking and you discover that you have a sword, you have your partner's skull on your person, and I guess your goal at that point is to maybe enter hell to get him back. Is that a fair assessment of where you're left at the beginning?
Yeah, very fair. I think the opening scene is your character Senua paddling on this hollowed out husk of a tree, and just the myriad of voices talking in her head while the narrator's explaining what's happening.
Yeah, and that is a hell of a way to open a video game.
For real.
And that kind of road to hell, so Hel, not like hell, Hell, double hockey sticks. You from there kind of split off, and that's when you start to get into what the game truly is, the combination of puzzle solving and combat. So do you want to talk about the puzzle solving first or the combat first?
Yeah, so I think we should talk about the puzzle solving.
Okay.
So I can really identify the two types of puzzles that were in the game, but they're really kind of the same puzzle. There was the specific angle you needed to look at something from to reconstitute it into the world and make it a reality. And then there was the look at an object in a certain way so it forms the shape of a rune, which will allow you to push through this door that is otherwise on fire when you touch it.
I tricked myself into playing The Witness again. and I really didn't like The Witness.
That's true.
Yeah.
You did kind of do that.
Yeah.
The Witness did it better.
The Witness 100% did it better. This was my least favorite part of the game.
Right.
Just because like I'm not a big environmental like puzzle guy, so to have that be essentially like 1/3 of what the game puts in front of you, I was just like, how quickly can I get through this? Because I hate this.
Yeah.
I don't think it was poorly done. I don't think it was like the best part of the game. I just think it was something that I had to get through, a trial, if you will, in order to proceed. I don't know if you liked it.
I'd largely agree with that. I think the thing that I felt missing in this game whenever I solved a puzzle was I didn't feel smart for having solved it. It felt on some level like obvious, and like you just stumble through it. Like there were some cases where I stumbled through the solution and I realized like, oh, this was actually supposed to be way harder than it was. And if the challenge or the puzzle doesn't have a level of difficulty, you don't get that rewarding sense. So it just feels more like a needless obstacle. Like, yeah, I know where I'm going to find this P lettered rune or this one that looks like a Sigma or like all of these different rooms. I can tell that beam is broken there, or, oh, look at this. There's a hole in this wall in the shape of the rune. What happens if I look at it? Oh, I've collected it and solved it. Great. And then there have been other times where one in particular I can think of, I'm sure you'll remember this. There's a crashed ship. It's the first time that you meet the big baddie with the axe, the Astaroth from Soul Calibur.
Is that Valverin or Suture or Suitor? I think it's Valverin. Is this like a boss enemy or just like one of
No.
one of the
It's the biggest grunt.
Okay, yes. Okay.
You remember Astaroth from
I do.
Soul Calibur?
Yes, not Nightmare, but Astaroth from Soul Calibur.
Yes.
I have Soul Calibur 6 sitting on my desk. Someday I will play it.
Yes, the big guy with the big axe. And the first time that you stumble across him in that room, for some reason, there are these weird beams in like odd angled shapes in the ceiling that are red, that are colored completely different from everything else, and none of it made sense contextually. But you knew that as soon as you see the rune door in front of you, it's okay. I just got to find 3 angles to look at this thing.
Yep. There's no reward.
Yeah.
Like even in a Zelda game, you get that little chime where you're like, ooh, hit that dopamine. But here it's just like, I'm going to continue to slog through this to push myself to the next combat encounter or the next story bit. The combat I liked a lot.
Did you?
I did, yeah.
Whoa. Okay. You break down the combat for me.
So again, I've not played like a Soul. Have you played a Souls game before?
Yeah.
How similar is it to us? I hate to go like
Not
it's like
great.
a Souls game.
Not really similar.
Okay, it's a very visceral experience where you're doing a lot of rolling, you're doing a lot of hopefully blocking and parrying, and there's a lock-on system involved in it too. So you're using the right stick to kind of flick between different enemies, and there will be 2 to 3 enemies, sometimes even 5 or 6 on the screen at once that are slowly coming towards you, and they will kind of signal how they're going to attack, and then they attack you. Hey, watch out. Yeah, you get those little whispers in your ear, and then they attack you. But typically it's only one attacking you at a time. You also have what I'm calling like a freeze ability that essentially you build up as you are rolling, blocking, or hitting enemies. And then if there's an enemy...
With a mirror, right?
With a mirror. With a mirror. And as you block these enemies, or as you do these items, you get the...
Build up focus.
You build up focus, exactly, and that helps you freeze, and you can defeat enemies more quickly. There's more tricks to it later on.
It's bullet time with a sword.
Yes. What I appreciated is how high stakes the combat was. Because if you take too many hits, like let's say you take 3 or 4 hits in a row, like you're dead. That's it. And it took me a little while to get past that of like, oh wow, this is like weighty, both like combat feel, but also the consequence for losing is pretty weighty.
Did you die a lot in combat? Did you find it was tough to get through each segment?
I think it took me a while to get used to the combat because I was trying to parry, and I'm actually terrible at parrying. So I ended up just kind of starting to roll around. And I would say for the middle 70% of the game, I didn't die once.
Okay. Yeah. See, I did not find much trouble with the combat except for the bridge to Hela. Which they just overwhelm you with enemies. And the vast, vast majority of enemies that you stumble across in this game don't require too much. You know, you can either
finesse, right?
Yeah, you can either use a quick attack or you can use a heavy attack. You can modify that by sprinting, or you can, block / time your parry. And because I think the move set is so limited and the combo system I didn't find was that great, I didn't have a ton of fun with the combat. And I found that aside from everybody except the guy with the shield, you could pretty much just block
Brute
their
force
attack
it, right?
and quick slash, one heavy strike, wait for them to block, and then swing at you again, and you block, and then you quick attack, and then you heavy strike, and you just rinse and repeat.
I would say if this game was any longer than it is, I would want either more finesse. And this game is like a 6 to 8 hour game, right? If it was any
Felt
more,
a whole lot longer.
Hey, I would want either more variety in the move set, like either through a second weapon. I know that's not the purpose, but I'm just kind of speaking about how the game could be better if it was longer.
You do get a second weapon.
You do get a second weapon.
No, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's no variety in weapons.
Or you need more enemy types. Because, in all fairness, there's really 6 main enemy types and then some of the bosses, which the bosses are fantastic, but I think
you like
come
the
back.
Bosses a lot.
Yes. The one boss in particular, Fenrir, was fantastic.
The Fenrir is the demon beast, the darkness?
Yes. Fantastic.
Okay, really?
Yeah, fantastic.
Interesting. I didn't find Fenrir that interesting.
No?
No.
Okay. Oh boy, we really different on this one.
We had very different experiences. I thought the bosses were a refreshing change and actually provided some amount of difficulty and challenge along the way. Mostly because the stakes are so high and you couldn't afford to learn what those were by mistake. You just needed to be very cautious.
Yeah. And when you speak about stakes, do you want to talk about kind of the stakes that are involved in this game? because they set up something.
So the story stakes or
almost your character stakes, right?
Okay.
So at the beginning, they talk often about the darkness, right?
right.
And at the beginning of the game, they set up the fact that as you die, and they actually force you to die like very quickly. There's no way to win like the first encounter you have. You have to die so they can show you that like, hey, when you die, you actually don't die. You'll come back to life, but the darkness, which is this black kind of
manifestation of your mental illness.
like pigmentation on your skin, will just slowly take over your arm. And they say if it gets up to your head, just game over. No, done. Game over. So those are supposedly the stakes of the game. Is if that darkness gets to your head, you're done.
Yeah, and that'll prevent you from reviving your lover, Dillian.
And from the sound of it, they sold it as, we're going to erase your save too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the way
That's what the controversy was when this game came out.
Yeah, that's what the controversy was. Is that if I do poorly, like Hellblade's going to erase my game.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does add stakes.
Yeah, so like I think we'll link in the show notes to what we're talking about, but Kotaku has a story about this. We'll link to it in the story. It's more complicated than just like, hey, if it reaches your head, you die. They actually call it a bluff. So like there's more to it than that.
Interesting.
That truly the stakes are that there are no stakes.
Right. Yeah. I also didn't feel like I was remotely close to, the darkness getting close to my head. I thought the combat was generally easy to get through. And what I liked about the puzzle sections was that I knew if I was in a puzzle section, I wasn't in a combat section.
And for the most part, you also weren't being going through a bit of psychosis.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece to it, right? Is that your character, and there's a great documentary in the actual game that when you finish it, I implore you to watch. Did you watch it?
I did. It seemed like a lot of justification for their depiction of mental illness and psychosis, and them saying, "Hey guys, trust us. We talk to a lot of people who have had psychosis, and a lot of mental health professionals to try and recreate this in as faithful of an experience as possible."
Because I think their perspective is it's not even been done in film, no less like a game, right? So they wanted to, because it's an interactive medium, they want to be able to show the audience what it's like to experience something like this and draw the line between psychopathy and psychosis. Because I can't even say the word. Psychopathy. I'm troubling. This word is troublesome for me. But essentially, like a lack of empathy is very different than psychosis. Because a lot of like villains in games, they just lack empathy and they just want to kill you, right?
Right.
But psychosis is not. It is a loss of contact with objective reality, which shows up in hallucinations and delusions.
Right. Believing that there are voices. Which I'm sure in their experience of it, there are voices in their head. But
and as an audiophile, I was in love with watching them produce like the actual voices in your head.
Yeah. The ASMR microphones.
Yes, the ear microphones.
Those creep me out so much.
Oh, they were so great. They were so great. So essentially, like, imagine we're in this size of a room. It's tarped off, and you have actors, and these actors are running around the room, whispering things and saying things to you like that are going to be in the game. I was in awe. I just love watching voice actors like do their craft, and also like sound engineers and mixers like put together the audio for a game.
Speaking of actors, this game has an interesting use of actors. There's I believe it was someone from the development team actually motion capped Senua. But in other segments, instead of motion capturing and modeling a character, they straight up took recorded video and put it in the game. With green screens, and that's how you end up, I think, talking with your mother and with Darude or
Dillian.
No.
Oh yes, the
Celt guy who looks a little bit crazy eyed.
Druth.
That's it. Druth. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting way to use real actors, and I thought it was a nice touch. Like they incorporated it quite well.
And it's not the first time. If you've played some of their other games, they sometimes do use full motion video.
What games would those be?
I think in Enslaved, they have one of the endings like encompasses full motion video, but this I would say is their most pervasive use of full motion video in a game they've done.
All right.
Even like spoilers, as we said before, your mother is burning at the stake, right? And you see her face on like a CG body, and her face is being like almost burned. And I couldn't tell, like, did they put makeup on her face or did they CG her face on this CG body? It was, I think, as an artistic piece
of art.
As a piece of art, this game like delivers. It does some stuff that I've never seen in games before.
They definitely gets a lot of credit for trying new things and going places that other people are probably afraid to.
And the actress you were speaking about, who actually won Best Performance at the Game Awards in 2017, her name is Melina Juergens, and she was like on the dev team, and she'd never done acting before. How crazy is that?
Nuts.
She has many protracted, like long soliloquy style monologues that she's delivering, sometimes through the fourth wall, and which was creepy as hell.
Yeah.
Or sometimes she's just delivering it to whomever she is speaking to, and she frickin' delivers. My God, she should be on the stage.
She does, a fantastic job. Should we talk about the story of Senua's Sacrifice?
Yeah, we should. I think we like started into it and then we came out of it.
Yeah. So broad strokes.
Yeah.
The story is about Senua's quest to, I think, make a plea to the god Hela of the underworld to get her lover Dillion back alive. And as the story progresses, you find out that Senua, who was raised by her mother and father, her mother, someone who is, I think, gifted with the voice, I think as they called it, which were, voices in her head. And her father, who was not very keen on, I think he was a shaman of some sort, was not very keen on the fact that she had these voices and this darkness and this mental illness.
Yeah, and so he imprisoned her for a long time as a part of that, like to punish her psychosis.
Yeah, and so Senua goes off into the wilderness, and I think when she gets back, she finds her love, Dillion, flayed and held up as a sacrifice. And as far as I understand, I think from that dev feature, the video at the end, it was a Norse ritual called like the Red Eagle or Splayed Eagle or something like that. And it looked gruesome. And so Senua then takes his head and goes to try and make a plea to the gods. And along the way, you have to fight, I think, smaller gods. Was it Fenrir, the guy with the flaming sword?
So Velvarin is one of them. So essentially, the game is split up into like Velrodin. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then
Raven.
Surtr.
Yeah, Suitor. Yeah.
Suitor. So those are kind of the two first mini bosses. Then you end up in front of a abandoned ship or like a crashed ship.
Ghost ship, yeah.
The ghost ship, and you take a series of trials after that, and then you descend into hell. That's kind of how the game is structured.
And I think just before you descend into hell, there's a tree with an ancient sword that's able to kill the gods. I think it's the story of Sigurd and Sigmund.
Yes.
And you have to complete 4 separate trials, which there are some creepy trials in there.
That's my favorite part of the entire game was the trials, yes.
It was the most like a Zelda game.
Yeah, except some of them, for example, will take away, like they will really dive into the psychosis piece. So the one that I was a particularly fan was the blindness shard trial.
I hated that one
Loved it
much.
so much.
I hated those like blobby human bits that were wandering all over the place that you couldn't get close to because then you'd die.
Yep. And essentially, like you are partially blinded,
I hate that
so
you
could
play this game.
You could only see like a small cone in front of your face, and the rest of it's just cloudy. And you're just imagine that you're moving in the dark, and that's how your character is moving. And you have to avoid these demons that you can barely see, and like they are activated by sound, for example. So there are chains hanging down from the wall, and sometimes you have to avoid the chains. You're wading through water. It was fantastic.
I felt my breathing pick up in that section. I felt my heart rate get faster. It gave me that feeling of being a kid at night in your room, afraid of a sound that you heard, and having no light on, and just relying on whatever night vision your eyes get adjusted to.
Yep.
And every tweak of the house and sound.
Have you ever played a game like this before? Because I know you're
can't
not a
say
horror
I
game
have,
guy.
no.
Have you ever played Eternal Darkness?
Yes.
Did this kind of remind you of Eternal Darkness a
No.
little bit? No?
I loved Eternal Darkness.
And this game, maybe not?
I thought this was a very good game, just not a game that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't enjoy my experience with it.
Should we cut to the chase and ask you kind of why? Or do you want to talk more about kind of how the game went?
Well, I just in general, I didn't feel like there was a lot of variation in what the gameplay was. And I found the story incredibly hard to follow. I think it relied a lot on the lore stones, which sometimes are easy to find, but often I think I missed one or two in a section, and that meant not getting the full story. And so a lack of being able to follow the story and not really enjoying the combat, you know, if I don't have either side of the equation, it's tough for me to really get engaged in the game.
Fair.
But I did I made sure that I listened to it the whole way through with headphones, and I did my best to play through it and get involved.
I think it's fair to say as well that, like, I didn't get all the lore stones. A lot of the time it was Druth who was the one who would kind of share the words of the gods, whether he was talking about Loki or talking about, like, it really leans hard into, like, Norse mythology, giving you an idea of, let's talk about Loki, let's talk about Odin, let's talk about the two brothers that you mentioned before.
I think it's father and son, Sigurd and Sigmund.
Sigurd and Sigmund. And the piece that I didn't really understand was that, like, Senua is based on a real goddess that they just discovered, like, recently, called Senua, who's kind of a Celtic barbarian Pict, I think is kind of what they call
Those
her.
are all words that I heard in that section of the documentary.
Yeah, it was a meld of Celtic and Viking, barbarian, Norse, and I had a really hard time following it. I guess what I appreciated is kind of how it brought Psychosis, like, really is going to give you the opportunity to understand what it's like to go through mental illness in a way that has never been done in a video game before. And I appreciated some of the stuff that they did with boss encounters, for example, or with some of the...
So do you want to explain your favorite boss encounter then?
Yeah, so I guess
darkness?
Yeah, the darkness. So there's a few different boss encounters. One that is just like a straight please help me.
Suitor is the one. It's a guy on fire. The whole theme of the level is catching things on fire and having to make it through to the next section.
Yeah.
Valravn is kind of, on some level, a hallucination where there are a bunch of statues of him throughout this world. And on one side of the tree, he's there and he's watching you. And on the next side, he's just a statue again.
Yes.
And his fight is really figuring out where he is and then making sure you can take him down.
Yep.
He's very much like a raven, I would say.
Yes.
And then there is the darkness, which is Fenrir, which is your favorite, right? Which is this beast that stalks you in the darkness and creates these horrible visions whenever you're not in the light. But whenever you're in the light, you're fine.
Yep.
Until you get to the final confrontation with him.
Where he appears in kind of his, I guess, dog. He reminded me of, like, Cerberus in kind of maybe one-headed Cerberus in the way he looked. And like a dog or like a cat, he would pounce at you and you're in an arena where you have to avoid his attacks. And at the same time, he sometimes breathes darkness in your general direction and you are experiencing, like, psychotic breaks while this boss is attacking you and the screen is flashing red with faces, like, screaming, and you have to, at the same time, you get flashes of Fenrir that you have to avoid while he's, like, coming at you. I just thought that that combination and the fact that you're fighting kind of a creature on four legs the first time you've done it in the entire game, that combination was why he was probably my favorite. Just the psychosis.
He was novel.
He was novel, yes. He's like nothing else in the entire game because everything else is just on two legs. Hey, he has a sword. Hey, he has a shield. Hey, he has scythes. But
Right.
he was very novel.
Until you face Hela,
Yes.
which is,
Boy.
yeah. So
I wish this game would have ended an hour earlier.
So, after you've dropped Dillion's head into the darkness and you go down and you find it and you fight this demon that had been haunting you the whole way through, and you get to this giant bridge and you piece it back together by looking at it from the correct angle to bring elements back into focus. You cross the bridge and you fight so many people. So many people.
They throw every single enemy you've ever fought and more.
Yeah.
Anything that can fit into the
Too
memory
much at
of the
once.
console
Exactly.
is coming at you.
Yeah.
And the goal of that is actually not to win, right?
Well, as soon as you get through the bridge, you're then in the section where Hela's in the distance and she tells you, like, what are you doing? You're not, like, you don't understand. And Senua makes this plea, like, I'll give you my soul. I'll fight with you in Ragnarok. I'll be at your side. Just give me Dillion back.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're faced with 3 rings as you run forward closer and closer to Hela, fighting different, again, monsters that you face this whole time that you can't actually lose to. I don't know if you realize that.
Well, at certain arenas, you can't lose to them.
Okay.
So the first 2 arenas, you cannot lose.
Right.
So you'll get knocked down, but you'll immediately
Yes,
get
good
back
point.
up. Because in this game, you get like a knockdown, which you have to like slam on buttons before. Because if you sit on the ground, someone will actually come and kill you. The hammer will come down and murder you. But in this case, the first 2 arenas, you can't die.
Right.
You could fall 1,000 times and you still wouldn't die.
Right. And then you get to the 3rd arena.
And you can die. And that's how the game ends.
And it whispers to you this whole time, like, stop
Just
fighting
die.
death. Just die.
It's time for you to go,
Yeah.
Senua.
Yeah, and it was only after, like, probably fighting that last ring for, like, 15, 20 minutes that I'm like, there's something wrong here. Like, how am I not defeating this yet? And then I realized, these whispers, Senua needs to, this whole journey is Senua being comfortable with death. And then the ending happens, and I don't understand it.
Whew.
Like, I pride myself on usually being able to figure out, like, the theme and the symbolism in the game.
Can I pay you a compliment? You're a smart guy.
Thank you.
And you're usually the one that comes and you're like, guys, I got this. I understand every piece of it, and let me tell you in a succinct 3-minute way.
I hope that I could do that sometimes when I try. But in this game, so much of it went over my head.
Yep. Can
And-
you describe the last? Can I try and describe the
Yes,
last 3 minutes? Let me
please.
try and so.
You're gonna have a better sense
I
of
don't
it than
think
I
so
will.
because essentially what happens is you get killed, and Hela comes to you and stabs you with your own sword, but then you become Hela at some point, I believe, and the camera turns and you go back to being Senua, but you kind of come out of, I don't want to call it like a bit of psychosis, but like you re-enter the quote-unquote real world, and you just kind of walk away and saying like, hey, I guess we're on to the next thing.
Yeah. Like, hey, there's going to be another game.
Right.
Also, the
man.
darkness that was all over her just disappears.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she suddenly transcends and becomes a god herself.
It's like the Spec Ops, the line ending, but not as impactful and way more confusing.
I was so confused. It definitely did not leave me with a sense of awe. Although I did love the music in that final boss
Yeah.
battle. There's some moments where they had some really good, like, yeah, we're going for this music.
Even the credit music was like a perfect like 2007 era like Nordic rock track, which I was super into. I'm like, yes, picked a good track on this one.
I
But
could not explain that ending better than you. I could not follow it. I don't know how it ties into the whole story. I'm just glad that I started piecing the story together at the end and what their roles were and how everyone fit together.
yeah,
It was this game, like I said, tough for me to get into because I couldn't follow the story and I didn't enjoy the gameplay elements of it, even though I thought they did a really good job of working together. Tough for me to enjoy it on the whole.
yeah. I think that this game does a lot of really cool things that have, I would argue, have never been done in a game before. It plays tricks with your mind. I think that in the fire stage that we talked about earlier, at one point I died about 4 times because it was saying it was whispering in your ear and it was saying, just run. You just need to run. And I didn't understand that you actually couldn't stop because there was fire that was coming into your face and you would get burned. And you're like, the way that you think about games is, if I get burned, I'm going to die. So like, avoid getting burned. But what they're teaching you is to like listen to what your voices are saying, in that if you stop at any point, you're just going to die. So it played with your expectation. It played with the kind of general rules of the game pretty well. I just wish that, because I could sit here and interpret it what it means. Is it that you have to embrace the darkness? But that's not right. Embrace the darkness within yourself to get better. It's not like, so like you.
Well, at the end of the game, she totally is, she looks in the mirror, the darkness version of her steps out, and she says, "I don't want to die," and she's like, "Then don't come with me." She like leaves it all behind her.
Yeah.
It's like, it seemed like on some metaphorical level, she transcends her mental illness.
Which like that's not how, as someone who struggles with his mental health himself, that is definitely not how you, like, you just don't say like, "Hey, I'm cured," right?
For real.
That's 100% not what happens there. It's a long drawn out process of introspection. But I guess what you're saying is maybe this whole journey through the game is how you struggle and surmount your mental health issues, and at the end you finally kind of crest and you get over it. But even like Dillian, so like you see an apparition of Dillian kind of in your reflection, and Dillian is talking to you about how like it's cool, it's okay, whatever, as you're dying, and then he just disappears and you're fine. I have so many questions.
Well, I felt like the Dillian speech at the end was, I enjoyed it. Because to me, that speech at the end, if I understood it correctly, was like, Senua, no, like, you have this mental illness because you're not willing to deal with death. You're not willing to let go. What is love without loss? What is life without loss? And so it was kind of Dillian kind of leveling with Senua that, like, if you want to get better, you need to get over my death. You need to be comfortable with death. Otherwise, you're going to be trapped, in the place you are now. So on some level, this game, I guess, is about grief. And I guess about dealing with loss, and as much as it is dealing with mental health. But again, like, still, this game so hard for.
It's incredibly abstract, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not, so like, I guess, as we wrap up the discussion, I would say that there's got to be a lot of checkboxes that you're going to hit in order to enjoy this game. It's a game that I probably didn't do the adequate amount of research about before I assigned it to you. But like, you got to be into environmental puzzle solving. You have to be into kind of combat that may get repetitive, and you have to be open to a game that is abstract, will challenge your preconceived notions about mental health, and also will be incredibly unique. I've not played anything like this before. But it's something that I couldn't go to, Joe Sixpack on the street and go like, "Hey, you know what you need to play? Hellblade, Senua Sacrifice." Yeah. It's a game that I will definitely go to some of my friends and be like, "Hey, you into something like a little bit unique, a little bit different, that really tackles an issue that's not been done in games before." Yeah. Hellblade is probably a game you should play. This makes me want to play DMC Devil May Cry. And they just recently got purchased by Microsoft.
Right,
so
yeah.
They will...
Interesting things on the horizon.
Yeah, I think they're doing like a character action, like a multiplayer character action game next.
I could see that going
which I'm not really into, but
no?
like a
multiplayer
multiplayer
could see that
focused.
Being interesting. Yeah, this game is definitely for people who like film and not movies.
100%, yes. Yeah. Yes, that will go to a film festival and be like, let's watch whatever. I'm just going to walk in and see what happens. But
yeah. So someone who likes Fellini and not Michael Bay.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Any final thoughts about Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice?
I would recommend it to a lot of people. It was just not a game that I enjoyed my experience with. So, on some level, if games are supposed to be pleasurable and rewarding, I didn't feel that. But I thought it was a worthwhile experience to develop some empathy and better understand what it's like when someone goes through psychosis.
I was immediately thinking of the works that kind of evoke parts of what this game tries to bring or doesn't try that brings to the table, and just the list like Dante's Inferno, like God of War 2017, Annihilation, Mother, like that's the type of games and films that I thought about when I played this game. Not a game that I would, like you said, recommend to everyone, but I think I'm incredibly happy that they made it. I'm incredibly happy that they took so much time and care in speaking with experts, both mental health clinicians, academics, about what it is like, and speaking to people that actually have psychosis to understand what it's like. There's a lot of care that went into this very personal, like intense emotional game. And if you're interested in anything that we've said so far, and you haven't played it, I would say, like, if you've stuck around this far and you haven't played it, you should probably play it.
I think it's well said.
Michael.
Yes, sir.
If they want to talk more about Hellblade, Senua Sacrifice, where's a good place to do that?
You can do that by going to leftbehindgame.club, clicking the big button in the middle of the page that says Discord, joining the Discord server. It's really easy to create an account. You join. There are a lot of people dropping hot deals, discussions about the latest things that are happening. I know there was some discussion there about guns and violence and whether video games have, something to do with that. There's been some discussions about Ninja's move over to Mixer. There's all kinds of discussions that are happening there, and always hot game deals that make it really hard to not spend a lot of money.
If you're into big money blevins or little money deals, you will find everything you need on the Left Behind Game Club Discord.
Well said, Jacob.
Thank you.
Where can the people find you at?
Aside
from the Discord server.
Well,
obviously.
if they want to find the Left Behind Game Club and they just, for some reason, heard this podcast and don't know where we are on social, you can find us on Instagram at Left Behind Game Club, on Twitter at Left Behind Club, and as you've stated before, leftbehindgame.club. If you like the show, leave us a review. You can find me at Jacob McCourt on Twitter, Instagram, and all other major social media platforms. Michael, where can they find you?
You can find me at Ruffolo M on most places online, or michaelruffolo.com. And that, my friends, is one less game left behind.